1 Peter 4:1 is where we're going to begin. A quick review as we go into this. John did a great job reasserting some of these primary themes, but I want to make them really clear. In fact, if you're a note taker, grab a piece of paper, grab your phone. If you take notes on your phone, I want you to write this down, all right? You ready? Let your conduct display the gospel, but write it down personally, right? Let my conduct display the gospel. Write that phrase down. That's going to be a common theme. It has been and will continue to be through this. Let my conduct display the gospel. Write that down and look at it. Let my conduct display the gospel. Look at those words. Look at that sentence. Let my conduct display the gospel. The way I interact with the world around me, the conversations that I have with people I work with, in my family, how I interact with my children and my spouse. Let my conduct display the gospel. I want you to write down one more sentence underneath that. God will call me into dark places. God will call me into dark places. Write that down. God will call me into dark places. Let your conduct display the gospel and know that God will call you into dark places. All right, we're reviewing the last few weeks, going to sum it up before we move into this next section. We should expect that God will allow us to be in hard relationships and in hard work environments because it is abundantly clear. Now again, look at your paper right there. God will call me, if you make it personal, call me into dark places. You better believe that God needs His truth, light, love, word, and ways known. So clearly, He's going to choose to put you in places where that needs to be known. And in places that needs to be known, well, those are going to be hard spots. Hard spots. Let your conduct display the gospel. Know that God is going to allow you to be in situations that are tough because it's in those tough spots that His light needs to be seen. With that in mind, let's go ahead and dive in this morning. I was reading on Facebook a couple of days ago, and one of my seminary master's degree professors wrote a statement. I thought it was really interesting, all right? Now, I'm going to put this on the screen. You can read it. I don't think that America is anti-Christian. I think it is anti-bully. And that's how it perceives American Christianity at the moment. Okay, leave that up in the back for a moment. When I first read that, the first thing that went through my mind is false. Right? If the burden of proof is on Christians being bullies or not, I can make a strong case through history, and even for a lot of Christians that I know, that people that really do act like Jesus aren't bullies. Now, yes, there are people that maybe wear a Christian t-shirt or call themselves Christian that do things that aren't like Christ, but they would be variants from the norm, not the norm. They shouldn't be. They would be variants from the true center, which is Jesus. But as I read through this, I think he's right. Because the burden of proof is on the phrase, it's perception, their perception. I don't think that America is anti-Christian. I think that it is anti-bully, and that's how it perceives American Christianity at the moment. That's how it perceives it. The media has worked really hard over the years to make Christians and Christianity look like it's all about controlling others. I mean, this is kind of our method of operation for the last few hundred years, right? So what we do in our modern world is we want to make the laws of the land mirror the biblical laws in Scripture. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. We should vote for that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And so what we do then is we fight for that to happen, but we also don't want to be around people that don't think like us or act like us or talk like us. We want to run from the dark places, not take the light into them, right? So the method of operation has not been running to the dark places that need light, but running from it. So what we do is we create our own Christian schools. Now again, there's nothing wrong with those, but we create our own Christian schools to get our kids out of the dirty, dark places. We do this all the way up through college, And then we get into the work world. And when we get into the work world, we then spend our time trying to get out of jobs that are really hard with bosses that aren't fair or aren't godly. Or we try to get out of situations where we work with people who don't mirror the love of Jesus or act like Christ. We work really hard to run from those situations, right? So the way Christianity has worked is we want to get away from everything that doesn't look like God, put it at arm's length, stand away from it as much as possible, and then through the legal system, we want the courts and fines and fees and benefits, and we want that to control everybody that we don't want to be around. That's how it's functioned. And the result of playing that out for a while, our absence from the darkness and pushing it away instead of engaging in it, has created this system where people that don't know real Christians very well look at them and think, boy, you guys are all about external control. And it feels like they're being bullied. It feels like they're being bullied. I don't think America is anti-Christian. I think it is anti-bully, and that's how it perceives. I'm not saying really is, but that's how it perceives American Christianity at the moment. I have a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. We stay close on Facebook. I read his stuff, he reads mine, and he is agnostic, edge atheism, kind of bounces back and forth from there. Can't really know that there's a God, but not really ready to say that for sure there's not one at all. And so he kind of lives in that agnostic atheist little vein right there. And everything that he throws out there, he copies stuff from media, social media, news agencies. Everything he throws out there over and over again has one resounding tone. Christians are out to make people that don't look like them suffer and hurt, either by keeping money from them or by fining them or by some legal action. They're out to make them hurt by external control. Now, I like to get on Facebook and then put a lot of information out there on the other side, talk about all the good things and gracious things that Christians are doing. But without a doubt, most media is trying to ring this tone that Christianity is antiquated, old, and keeping us from good things. The way, if I could sum it up, that he would look at us would be simply this. We choose to play by the biblical rules, and he doesn't care about that. But he believes that we choose to play by the biblical rules, and we want to make you do so too by the legal law of the land. And it's that second part that he can't stand. Here's the thing. Christianity, at its core, isn't about external restraint. It's about internally driven desire to honor God because of our love of him. Now that switch from external control to internal love is unbelievably important. Look at those two sentences I had you write down. Let your conduct display the gospel. Where is the gospel needed to be displayed the most? Absolutely in dark places. In places that aren't fun necessarily to work. In places that the gospel isn't being lived out, where you are the light and example of that truth. That's where it needs to be displayed. And instead of running into it, feeling called like a missionary, we push it away and run from it. Dr. John Piper says it well. God is most glorified when we are most satisfied in him. I'm going to hang on that concept for a moment. In fact, let me say this a little bit differently. I know that I'm probably going to offend a few people this morning. Just wait till we get to the text. You best display the gospel. You best display the gospel not by standing at a distance from culture, lobbing all these legal grenades, not by trying to control the people that you don't ever want to meet or talk to by external laws. That's not how you best display the gospel. You best display the gospel by demonstrating your satisfaction in Jesus. When you display the hope of heaven is stronger than the fear of death around people who don't have the hope of heaven, they see something different in you. When you display the hope of heaven is stronger than the fear of death. When you display the hope of justice is stronger than the fear of being mistreated. When you display the ways of Jesus are more satisfying than popularity. Like high school students, talking to you. Right now, man, in high school, the youth pastor part of me will never turn fully off. But man, when you display that your satisfaction in Jesus is better than popularity, that speaks volumes. When you display the ways of Jesus are more satisfying than popularity, when you display that Christian generosity is more satisfying than amassing more toys, you proclaim the gospel best by living love-struck with Jesus. Growing up, my grandpa, Cale Valesky, loved that old man. Had no degree in theology, got saved later on in life. I've told a story before here. Got saved later on in life. He definitely was kind of a country boy, hunt, fish, ride motorcycles. I grew up around motorcycles. In fact, I honestly don't even remember learning to ride them. I remember riding them, of course, a lot, but I don't even remember learning to ride them. I have memories of my grandpa having multiple bikes in his garage. I remember going hunting with grandpa, sitting underneath the tree, talking life. Loved that old man. This guy got saved later on in life. Radical transformation. He was super social, and the one theology that he had down was simply this: Jesus is better. He used to frequent a donut shop. In fact, growing up, it's kind of funny. It's like, do you guys ever watch the TV show Cheers? Where everybody knows your name. You guys ever seen that show? I won't sing any more than that, I promise. My grandpa in this donut shop would walk in there and everybody's like, Cale! It was great. It was like the old man Christian's version of a bar. And I'd walk in there with grandpa, and grandpa would walk in and he'd talk with his buddies and hang out. And every time I walk in that donut shop, I'd listen to my grandpa, and he would, it's the normal old man conversation. I mean, I was around my grandpa a lot. The normal old man conversation. So how you doing today? And the guy would, oh, my hip's been bothering me. And how are you doing today? I haven't slept well, and I don't even know how long. How are you doing today? I tell you what, this government's messing everything. I mean, the normal conversation, right? And then it would always get back to grandpa, and they'd be like, Cale, how are you doing today? And he'd say something like, oh, I'm getting older. He had some arm issues. He's like, my arm's kind of hurting a little bit, but you know what? I'm so glad I found Jesus. I mean, and that almost, even as a kid, I remember him like turning the conversation that way. And even as a kid, I thought, well, that's kind of an awkward change. I mean, like, doesn't feel like the natural flow of conversation. Instead of like driving down the road of everybody talking about something, it's like grandpa would just throw the brakes on and take it an awkward direction and go, Jesus is better. I'm not feeling good, but you know what? I really do believe that God one day is going to make all things right, and I don't have to be afraid. Or somebody complain about the government, and grandpa will go, you know what, you're right, it's not right. These young kids, they're messing everything up, but I really do believe there's going to come a day when God is going to make all wrongs right. And I walked into that coffee shop with him week after week after week with that old man, and his defense of the gospel wasn't apologetic primarily in nature, though there was some of that. His defense of the gospel was basically this: Jesus tastes so good. And when everybody else was afraid and miserable and angry, Grandpa had peace and hope and love. When everybody else was frustrated with the direction of everything happening, and Grandpa could be too, but man, he always ended it with this satisfaction in Jesus. And even now, when I walk into a donut shop, you don't even have a lot of those anymore, but walk into a donut shop and I smell whatever it is they make donuts out of, dough or whatever, and coffee, I have such great memories of Grandpa displaying the gospel by being love-struck with Jesus. See, here's the thing about my grandpa. He saw dark places, and he loved to walk into them, not away from them. People would say, I'd be out in public, at Walmart and somebody'd bump into him. How are you doing today? I'm doing all right. Or he'd be talking to the cashier, checking out, and they'd say, oh, I've got a long day, and I'm a single mom, and I'm struggling with it. And Grandpa would go, you know what? I'm going to pray for you right now. He's like, Jesus tastes better. I grew up around that. The kind of awkward evangelism that people often push you away from, I watched my grandpa display his deep satisfaction in Jesus, and man, it was amazing because Jesus is better. You proclaim the gospel best by living love-struck with Jesus. With this in mind, let's go to the text. 1 Peter 4, 1 through 4. Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves the same way of thinking. For whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. For the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join them. Boy, this is my grandpa to a T. He was friends with all of them, so he got invited to everything. But he refused to participate. When they asked why, he'd say, basically, Jesus is better. They're surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. They pick on him. I love this. This is Case and Holdren in 2006 summarized it like this. They said, this final paragraph of Peter's ethical section. So what we've been studying is Peter's section on Christian ethics to culture and even internally. This final paragraph of Peter's ethical section may be divided into two subpoints. The first one, the way Christians are to live within their contemporary culture, and then he references verse 1 through 6. And then the second part, the way Christians are to live with one another, referencing verses 7 through 11. This week, we're going to deal with the prior, how we interact with culture. What's the best way in the summation of Peter's proclamation of Christian ethics within culture? What should we do? The two sentences as you write down. Display the gospel with your conduct. Know that God will call you into dark places, because it's the dark places that need the light. This week we deal with the prior, Christian ethics and contemporary culture. Next week we'll tackle how we are to live among one another. This brings up an interesting thought. What is best ethically, according to Peter, in our orthopraxy? So how we live out the gospel. The way in which we live out the gospel, what does he show us is the best ethical way to do that? Right here it is. He walks us through the text leading to this section. If you are mistreated for your faith, first of all, you have to be bold enough in how you live that you stand out in contrast to the culture around you. But when you stand out in contrast to the culture around you because of your Christianity, when you are mistreated for your faith, 1 Peter 2, 13 through 17, you proclaim the love and hope of Jesus by a right heart and right actions, so much so that you stand out against what others naturally would do. What if you were mistreated by a hard boss? I mean, the right thing to do is, pray that God takes you out of every hard situation. The right thing to do is, pray that God would punish your boss in some way. The right thing to do is, no. It's pretty clear in Scripture. We talked about this a few weeks ago, 2 Peter 2, or 1 Peter 2, 18 through 24. If you are mistreated by a hard master or boss, proclaim the love and hope of Jesus by a right heart and right actions, so much so that you stand out against what others naturally would do. Are you seeing a theme? If you are mistreated relationally, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7, proclaim the love and hope of Jesus by a right heart and right actions, so much so that you stand out against what others naturally would do. A God-ordained right action is to display the gospel in such a strong way that you stand out against the crowd. There's one more word that I think is really interesting here. It's the word suffering. Why is this such a common theme? Crossway in 2008 says it really well. It says, Peter's point is that when believers are willing to suffer, when they're willing to suffer for their work as a Christian, when they're willing to suffer for it, the nerve center, this is so good, listen to this. The nerve center of sin is severed in their lives through suffering. Through suffering. Take your faith. You take your faith so far you feel it. You take your faith so far that you feel it, meaning you give until it hurts. I mean, most people, when they give, like when they feel it in their heart to help out, like downtown. We have our downtown ministry where we serve the poor, we help them out, we give them meals every week. Most people, when they want to give to that, it's like, oh, you know what? I can help out with that this week. And they pull their wallet out and they're like, oh, sweet, I got a 20. And they put the 20 in the plate. Like, they didn't even know the money was in their wallet. And so if they miss the money, they're not really going to miss it because they didn't even really know it was there. Like, you're giving out of the excess that you have. You don't feel it at all. It's just, you know what? Yeah, I can help out with a few meals down there. And you help out. But man, those people who give to help others at a level that you feel it, that's different. One of the most powerful demonstrations of this that I've ever seen was down in Dallas. A friend of mine by the name of Mark. He was about 10 years older than me, so I'd still consider him in my age bracket. Very, very, very successful. And he made a statement to me. He says, Mike, I budget to expand the gospel. I was like, what does that even mean? He's like, I budget to help fund missionaries. I budget to help feed the poor. I budget to help. And he goes down the list where, like, you know, you sit down and you put a budget together for the year. I'm not talking given like, you look at that. I got an old crumply dollar bill. Here, you can have that, poor guy. Good luck. Like, not that kind of stuff. Like, he budgets, he sits down, lays out a budget, and like you're trying to figure out how to fit a car payment in, he works that hard to make sure that he can make Jesus famous with what already belongs to him. That was so radical to me. To meet somebody who budgeted to make Jesus famous, to help the poor, to feed those that are homeless, to help missionaries out and proclaim the gospel even more. He set a budget for it and worked around it. It blew my mind. And so I asked him to come and share to our young adult group about that. And when he was sharing in the young adult group, the obvious question was, why would you do that? And here's his answer. Because the hope of Jesus has been so good to me, I want others to experience it too. Do you see it? You take your faith so far that you feel it, meaning that you suffer by serving, right? Another example, you give till it hurts. You serve because it's right. You serve because it's right, not because it's easy. Most people, when they volunteer for ministries, it is predominantly driven by what is fun. Now, that's not always wrong. You can serve and do it because it's fun. I don't think that's bad at all. In fact, I hope you do have fun when you serve in areas. But man, when you meet people that are called to it, it's a different level. Called. When you give until it hurts, when you serve because it's right, and it's ethically right action is why you do it, not just because it's fun for you. When you sacrifice a big business deal because of a moral obligation, people are going, why would you not do that? Dude, all you had to do was lie. All you had to do was twist the truth. And you go, I can't. And they go, that's crazy. Think how much money you would make. And you would go, my relationship with Jesus satisfies more than any amount of money I can make. Peter's point is that when believers are willing to suffer, the nerve center of sin is severed in their lives. Suffering severs the primary driver of the human heart. And the primary driver of the human heart is this. Are you ready? It is temporal pleasure. That is your functional God. That's your functional God. And until Jesus satisfies more than temporal pleasure, your witness is going to be buried under social norms. 1 Peter 4, 5 through 6. Let's keep going. But they will give an account. This is good. But again, 1 Peter, super bold. But they will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is why the gospel was preached even to those who are dead. Now, he doesn't mean preached to those who have already passed away. He's talking about preached to the saints that have already gone on. That though judged in the flesh the way people are, they might live in the spirit the way God does. Here again, Peter does this. Now, this is so important. Peter doesn't let his downtrodden, persecuted comrades go without hope of justice. God, in the end, will judge perfectly. You got to trust him. One of the greatest witnessing tools that you have is living like you believe that God is going to make all things right in the end. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching my kids fight. I say that like they only fought a couple of weeks ago. The reality is they fight all the time. I just happened to think about this a few weeks ago while I was watching them fight. And when I called one of them out, I was like, "Come here. What's your problem? Why are you yelling at?" And you know, you get that little kid, like, little lip going, "Daddy, it's not fair." And I'm going, "Okay, what do you mean not fair? What's not fair?" "Well, we always watch the shows that she wants to watch, and I want to watch the shows that I want to watch, and if we just watch her shows," and he goes down this big, talk about how it's not fair, and we need to make sure that everything is just and right in the family. And as I'm listening to this child go on, "It's not fair, it's not fair," it hit me that the core of his heart is he is afraid that he is going to be mistreated, that it isn't going to be just, that he won't be given what is due to him. And then I got down and I looked my baby in the eye and I said this. I go, "Do you trust that Daddy will do his best to make it all right by the time the day is out?" And he looks at me like, "What are you talking about?" And the truth is, he probably didn't know what I was talking about. This is why Leslie's the better parent. He's like looking at me kind of funny, and I go, "No, listen to me. Do you trust me? Let her do this, let her finish it, but by the time the day is out, I will make it okay." And then he reaches up and he gives me a big bear hug. And he goes and he plays. You see, the peace that he had in that moment, don't miss this, the peace that he had in that moment had nothing to do with things being justly laid out for him at that time. It had to do with his trust that the person who has power in that home is going to make it right in the end. And listen, brothers, Christian brothers and sisters, God is going to call you into dark places where the gospel needs to be proclaimed. He is going to allow you to have jobs that you don't like, that are difficult to be in. He's going to allow you to walk into relational issues, help counsel friends of yours. He's going to allow you to have neighbors that drive you crazy because your mission on this planet is to proclaim the gospel. And so clearly he's going to put you in places where the gospel has to be proclaimed. It's a tongue twister. Clearly he's going to do this. Do you trust in the end that God will make it all right? Do you trust in the end that God will make it all right? You can't. You cannot truly give until it hurts, serve until it hurts, sacrifice social status. You cannot honor a boss who doesn't deserve it, or even stay faithful to a spouse who isn't, unless you believe one day God will make all things right. And it is your Christian conduct that displays the gospel best. I'm going to invite Josh up. This is a really, really hard text because it is not American. The purpose of this text has nothing to do with you being rich and powerful. It has nothing to do with you living a really long, healthy life. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your primary objective, and the primary objective is to make Jesus famous. So my grandpa, in his final days on this planet, I wasn't with him right when he died, but the last days that I had with him. We went to McDonald's. He wanted to go there. Now, McDonald's was another one of his places he loved to go and hang out. And you have to help him out of the car. So we opened the door, and I leaned down, and I helped my grandpa out. My brother's with me, and my dad, and we helped grandpa out. He makes his way into McDonald's. He walks in, and of course, he knows people everywhere. And he loved that cheap coffee. I told him we could splurge for the good stuff. No. We sit down, and at the table, Grandpa is sharing his story, thoughts on life, the best that he can. He had a stroke, so it's really hard for him to communicate. He can't get it all out very well. And with people around, see, this is the thing that made him so great. He didn't save his satisfaction of Jesus just for the quiet room. He let his satisfaction in Jesus be known. Be known. And he's trying to talk about heaven, freedom, and feeling free. And he's having a hard time because of his stroke. He can't communicate well, so we start kind of filling in the words for him as tears are running down his cheeks. Grandpa, you believe one day you're going to get run again. Nods. It's like, Grandpa, I can't wait to be there with you. And as we're there doing this, having this conversation, I don't know, but I think it's amazing to me that Grandpa, by his choice, had this conversation in McDonald's. Part of me thinks, what's wrong with you, old man? And then as I get older, I realize he knew exactly what he was doing. Because his final statements on this earth were, Jesus satisfies more than my pain, than money, than power, than wealth. Jesus satisfies more. Jesus and the hope of heaven is greater than my fear of death. And all the way to the end, he walks into culture and lets that statement be known. You want to know how to make America a Christian nation again? You don't bombard them with laws and rules. You show them that Jesus satisfies more. Every day, in your workplace, at home with your children, you show them that Jesus satisfies more. And when you demonstrate to the world around you that the hope of heaven and the work of Christ is better, you don't have to control them with laws, because deep down their heart longs for that hope too. First two sentences I had you write down before we started. You ready? Display the gospel by your conduct. That's what you got to do. Display the gospel by your conduct. And God will call you into dark places, because that's where the light is needed. So instead of living like Eeyore, poor me, life is so tough, it is time to be bold in your faith and stand up and be proud of the hope that you have. Let your satisfaction in Jesus be the proclamation of the gospel. Because Jesus is better.